This is the Mod Tycoon with Warframe Breakdown, where we break down Warframe so you can be broken in Warframe. So what we're going to go over today is Nekros. Nekros, this is our very first Warframe breakdown where we go over every single one of his abilities, his attributes, what makes him really, really great, and more importantly, why would people even want him in a mission, and what makes Nekros the greatest farming frame in all of Warframe. Let's get started. So, first off, with Nekros is his very unique set of kits. If you're played Nekros before and you found out that you were really, really, really squishy and you couldn't quite figure out why you were super duper squishy, it might be because he has some unique synergies that you need to be aware of first before you even remotely get involved with him. And to start with those unique synergies, we got to understand a little thing. What I like to do when I come to make builds in Warframe, I like abilities that capitalize on other abilities that activate kind of chains of reactions and kind of cycles inside of a ability. And you'll notice immediately right off the bat a couple of unique features when you're comparing Nekros to other Warframes. You'll see that he has a high amount of shields compared to the average Warframe. Nothing like Hildren. He has nothing on Hildren in terms of shields for Warframes, but just his unique kit. Just you can see his shield start off with 150. If we were to compare him to a lot of other basic Warframes that you would normally know as tanks, zero shields, Haro. He has 150, so very comparable there. Revenant has a little bit more with 225, but on his release, Nekros had pretty high shields, and so the pitfall that a lot of people fall into is they immediately assume that because he has a little bit larger amount of shields at max rank, that therefore what we need to do, as you can see, 450 shields at max rank, we need to dump as much redirection as we possibly can into this Warframe. And when it comes to that, that's one of the things that you can't fall into with Nekros is thinking that shields is where it's at. The problem with shields, and everybody will tell you that it's played Warframe more than a week, the problem with shields is there are a lot of elements and there's a lot of enemy damage that they deal that completely bypass your shields altogether and just go directly for that health. And with Nekros, his unique kit allows you to kind of utilize that damage going towards your health as a means to regenerate things. So let me show you what I mean and what I've been yabbering on all about. So this is my particular build, and as you can see right off the get-go, I've thrown a lens on, and the reason why I've thrown a lens on is because as a MR30, I have come to find that every new person I come across in some form or fashion needs to have a little bit of help grinding out resources, and because they need help grinding out resources, I end up using the king of farming to grind out those resources. So as you can see, my Necro, I got a obviously that is to help me generate all my focus. I have 6 Forma. That's right. I have dumped 6 Forma into this Warframe. It's got nothing on any other YouTuber that's dumped their 1,000 or whatever ridiculous into. It's just that in order to really get a decent Necros, you need to throw in at least 4 before you start seeing some true genuine results with him, and you'll say like, hey, I'm kind of sort of taking out these level 200 guys and I'm not sort of dying at the same time. So we'll start off with that. So the most important 3 mods I would say when you're building your Necros is you need to have Despoil. It's a must-have mod. Despoil, Shield of Shadows, and Equilibrium. Why are these 3 mods important? Because they go off of these 2 abilities. So let's see if I have a standard set. I might have actually already taken them through the helmet a couple of times. Let's see if I got a standard set kits with him. I do not have a standard set kit with him, so let me go to the helmet. That way you can see. Well, we'll start off with his very first ability here, and then we'll go to the helmet so you can truly see the other abilities that normal would be here. As you can see on every single one of my kits, I've actually taken out this middle ability. So we'll go like this, so you can see the full kit of Nekros. We'll just throw that in a chat there real quick. And if we pull up Nekros, oh geez, I did not anticipate that. Cool. DE's like yeet. So, he has 4 abilities, and his 4 abilities, starting with Soul Punch, is he literally punches life force out of enemies and uses them as a projectile. Um, because he literally uses them as projectile. It has an initial at max rank of 500 impact, at max rank 25% HP for an instant KO. Sends the enemy flying into other enemies, dealing damage to them. If you have 50 impact while they're flying and 100 impact as a small AoE after they land. And it's essentially all the ability. It's force push, guys. It's force push, and you cannot beat force push. I love force push. His second ability, which is called Terrify. I'll go to my helmet so you can actually see that, because I have subsumed every Warframe in the game, so it's very easy to pull up these abilities that may or may not have been lost to that abyss. Here we go. So we got Terrify, and here's Terrify. Terrify, what it does is it takes all the enemies within an AoE, starting at a radius of 15 meters, and it has a base duration of 25 seconds, and it only affects 20 enemies. Okay, you heard that correctly. And that enemy affected is not increased by ability strength or ability duration or ability efficiency. It doesn't increase. So you'll only get 20 enemies that are terrified of you. The enemies, when they are activated and they are terrified, they do have a small armor reduction. In addition to having that armor reduction, they run away. So you can only get 20 enemies and they run away. And we'll find out quickly that might, you'll think you'll be doing this and you'll think you'll be saving, but there'll be that one guy, that 21st guy, that 22nd guy that didn't get impacted, didn't get affected at all, and he's gonna yeet your hide and he's gonna put you on the ground faster than you can say oops. So if there's any ability to switch out, from my experience, it's been this ability, because there's so many other armor stripping abilities, and there's other synergies that you can have with the helmet that can actually completely negate all damage that is coming to you on top of what your fourth already does, in addition to that. So it does have an augment. Enemies that are affected by the augment, they're slowed down. This does very little to protect Nekros, very, very utility, and oftentimes just slows down your gameplay. It prevents you from spawning in new enemies because they're not dying, and it just slows you down altogether. Now, this is the two important abilities, which I've been talking up to this point, almost kind of like jabbering on about, kind of saying yada yada, not making a whole lot of sense here. But these last two abilities are the most important part of Nekros, and you're going to find out that these last two abilities are what ultimately save you in the end. And the first ability is Desecrate. Desecrate, what it does is all the dead bodies that drop within an AoE basically get desecrated, and they drop additional loot. And it's very, very nice. All fallen enemies within the AoE do stack with other Nekroses up to 54% per body. And I say per body like that, and we're going to go in a little bit further detail on what I mean by that. And it does cost 10 energy per corpse, with the potential for enough energy for all bodies. So if you increase your energy capacity, that means you can desecrate more bodies that quicker. Does have that, but you're going to find out that you might not necessarily need this. This is also affected by ability efficiency, so that you can decrease how much energy you're spending per body that's being desecrated. And the last and final ability that we have is going to be Nekros' fourth, and it is Shield of Shadows. So Shield of Shadows, what it does is it does have a high drain. All the previous enemies that you kill, they go into this kind of mode where they're harvesting, and you can harvest the bodies of the enemies that you've killed, and then you bring them back to life to fight alongside you, as you can see in the little clip there. Their ability damage that they deal and the health multipliers that they have are impacted by ability strength, and their decay is impacted by ability duration and ability efficiency. And then if you have the Shield of Shadows augment, as you can see, I can have those guys travel up to 95 meters away from me, essentially across the entire map, and they will still reduce the damage I take. Now, the reason why I feel like ability strength is really, really important on this build is for two reasons. Essentially, when you have the Shield of Shadows augment, the enemies that you bring back to life are an extension of your health. They take damage for you. If you are a person standing in the middle amongst all the enemies and you get shot directly, not only is it 95% of it is damage reduced, but that 95% damage is actually given to the enemies you brought back. So lower enemies, or your non-heavy target enemies, when they are brought back, they tend to be the very first to go, because they can't absorb all that heavy hitting damage that you're taking from either that heavy gunner or that Nox. But if you have a Nox on your side, or if you have an Orb Spider from Fortuna on your side, it can take a lot more of that damage because its health capacity is a lot higher. And then, of course, you do have the health decay on top of that, um, to prevent it from lasting essentially forever. So the way my build works here with Nekros is we have Shield of Shadows, we have Despoil, and we have Equilibrium. And Shield of Shadows takes the damage that you take and gives it to your guys that you bring back, and Despoil makes it so that you drop additional loot. But in addition to, well, sorry, not additional loot, it makes it so that you consume health instead of energy. So it does have a small health and energy drop chance increase, which is very important because if you drop health orbs and you have equilibrium on, that's how you get all your energy back. So as you can see, I do not have any primed flow on my build, and that's because every single one of my abilities, when I'm using them in game, they synergize with that. So I will make a cast and I can spam any one of my abilities and I'll still be able to use it however I want. So I have vitality to increase health. I have overextended to increase the range at which my drones can be away from me and still take the damage for me. I have the ability strength so that they can take more hits, they can deal more damage, and they can survive harder hits altogether. And then I also have this little fun one, which is a really nice augment. Now this augment, I keep on usually when I'm going up against low tier enemies, but I also come up with when I have newer players with me in my squad. What I'll do is I have this augment on, and I can bring them back, and can be across the map, and they can survive and still get their affinity. I have sure-footed on, prime sure-footed, just so that I don't get knocked down ever. Literally, it's impossible for the enemy to knock me down. I might get like a little bounce back, but I won't ever fall, so I don't ever have that time where I have to spend just trying to get up. Then a couple of other things that help out my equilibrium synergies. I have Arcane Energizer, which is good for the team as well as myself, where it gives us and them energy. And then I have Arcane Guardian. I've heard of people like switching this out for Arcane Pulse. So if you have Arcane Pulse, that's a good one too, where when you pick up the health orbs, it gives you massive amounts of health back. That's a good one to have. In addition, I like to have the Arcane Guardian so I can have the additional survivability. I know you could technically switch it out for, there's a better one, Arcane, Arcane, shoot, what is it, Bodyguard? Yeah, there it is. Nope, that's not it. There's a Arcane Tanker, there it is. So Arcane Tanker, and there's another Arcane, basically they relatively do the same percentage, but they give you a crazy amount of armor relatively quickly, similar to one another, so that you can also have that synergizing with you as well. So here we go. We'll go ahead and we'll take out, let's see, what kind of, we'll take out, nope. Let's, we will do this one. We'll just do this one just for kicks. But we'll just go in, and for demonstration, we'll go ahead and put this on to public so people can join us, so you can kind of see how these abilities work, so that you can see that I'm not pulling things out of my hide. So again, ultimately what we want to be doing is we want to be killing bodies. Oh, there's another unique synergy that Nekros, I almost forgot about it. I need to show you the rest of my loadout because there's synergies even between the weapons. So before we go into this mission, so I have on a Silver Prime and Akajara, and I got a Paracesis. And the reason why I picked these three weapons is for one reason and one reason only. And that is all, they are all high slash weapons. So if I pull out my if I look at my Paracesis, I don't have any elements other than slash. And that's important because you'll see that as I slice these guys open, they're going to fall into a whole bunch of pieces. And we're not going to be desecrating one body, but we're going to be turning one guy into 5 bodies. And then we'll be desecrating each one of those bodies 5 different times. So let me see. I think I have a buddy on that also will join us. He might have a Nekros. Let's see. Nope, I don't think he's on it quite yet, but not to worry. We'll see when they are on. I'll write out chat here to see if I can get another Nekros so you can see the other ability with the third. Here we go. There we go. We got our ad out. We'll see who joins us and who doesn't. And we'll just go into a random quick mission here. We'll go to Earth. I'm picking Earth because slash bypasses enemy armor. It does not bypass enemy shields. So with that being the case, we want to go, typically if you have slash weapons, you want to go up against armored units. If you are going up against corpus units, you might want to throw on other elements like Toxin. It's not ideal to be throwing on Toxin to get rid of your synergy with your third, but it's a good thing you can possibly do just so that you can make sure that you can actually kill the enemy if you're planning on doing like farming and say like Steel Path or something, where the enemies have really, really high health and armor counts. So abilities that, as you might have saw, that I recommend that you go ahead and throw on Nekros. As you can see, I'm using the one with Mirage's Eclipse, and the reason why I chose Mirage's Eclipse because it does 300% additional damage increase on top of the Shield of Shadows, making the damage decrease absolutely insane. So I'm just going to pull up my Desecrate here. Now, with the build I have, my Desecrate will never go down, ever. It doesn't. It's impossible for it to. Because as I kill these guys, it comes right back up. And my health needs to be essentially at like 5 before I stop really losing things and I'm unable to activate it. But if you do things and you play your cards right, like if you throw on Grendel's Nourish, you get health back instantaneously, and then you also get a toxin damage buff on top of that. And then you also get armor, and you get an energy regen, and it's just, you get all sorts of crazy multipliers on top of that. So as you can see, my third is still pulsing in the bottom right, and that means it's still active. So as it still pulses, it's still active, and we're still getting the benefit. And as you can see, this guy, he's going through, watch these bodies, there's 2 bodies, he nice and neatly sliced that up nice and neatly for us. Let's see if we can get one to go into several pieces. Let's see. Oh, I desecrated it way too fast. There we go. Sometimes you gotta move really, really quickly. So I'm slicing this up, and as you can see, I sliced him up into 3 parts there, and I made him drop 3 additional drops off of his table. So he got 2 additional body parts, we got boom, boom. As you can see, we got 2 drops. We got 50 energy back that time. And if you have, now so, if I got 2 body parts going, and I'm able to slice those guys into 2, and Nekros stacks 54%, and it stacks additively. So it's like, you have a 54%, if another Nekros comes in, that's another 54% on top of that. So when they both desecrate, it's actually like 116%. Essentially, you've guaranteed that each body part is going to give an additional piece of loot. So as you can see, I already got 2, so that means we'd be popping out like 4, not just 2. And if we had 2 other Necroses, it'd be like a 200, sorry, it would be 108 if it was 2 of us, and then 216 if there were 4 of us. So they would be popping out with at least 2 additional drops on top of whatever else we're doing. So if you're trying to go, for an example, get like ferrite or credits or just anything, if you can get that guy's drop table to drop it more often, you can physically get more out of it just from making them drop more. So I'm slicing their bodies up, I'm proccing as much slash as I possibly can to get them all to explode, so we can get them slicing into bits and pieces, so I can desecrate all their nice little bodies so that we can get more loot. And I'll just go ahead and activate that, and didn't even just like one-shotted the guy, didn't even need to work too hard. Granted, I have a whole bunch of other crazy buffs popping up in the top right corner that are also helping me out, including my Kavat. My Kavat is actually increasing my crit tiers, so there's that's going on for me. And we're just going through these guys, just ripping them apart and getting all sorts of loot. Now, that wasn't a particularly hard mission, so you didn't really get to see me using the first, but here, let me go ahead and use the 4th while we're waiting for our guy to extract. And as you can see, I killed 7 guys at least, and I was able to pull all 7 of them back. And now you can see I have those lines coming off of me. Those lines would be like, if I were to get hit, the damage would travel down those lines to the guys I brought back, and the guys would take the damage instead. And so that's how that works. So essentially what really works with Nekros is going to be a lot of your energy regens. So we went over Mirage's Eclipse. Mirage's Eclipse is nice because also you have that passive effect Ring of the Dark, that you don't take any damage because the enemy physically can't hit you. Grendel's Nourish, you get the damage buff on top of the health regen. Blood Altar, you just straight up get a lot of health relatively quickly. And so those are the abilities I recommend that you go ahead and throw on. Now you're probably wondering, but Vama, I heard that Core was better. I heard that Hydroid was better. I heard that all these other Warframes were way better than Nekros just because, like, I got my Strangle Dome and they got guaranteed, they got 60%. Nekros only has 54%. Yeah. Oh, and then, like, my favorite one, my favorite one, Atlas. Atlas is great too. So now let's go over and let's explain why Nekros is the king of farming. And let's go ahead and stack them. So we know a couple of things. One, we know Nekros stacks with other Nekroses, so you can get up to a 216% drop chance from every single body part up to 5. So that's 216 times 5. I'll let you guys do the math there. That's a crazy amount of drops just from having 4 Necroses in your squad. Typically what people do, it's kind of interesting because not everybody knows this. So what you can do is you can take a group of 4 Necroses in. When Fortuna first came out, it was a really, really big deal that you increased your drop chances. Now, Toroids, they were a bit of a struggle for everybody because they were impacted by loot drop chance boosters and that kind of stuff. So it was important to bring those things in, but they also dropped from normal enemies, and you could only get them in like 3 places for the Toroids and Fortuna. So if you didn't bring a full squad of Necroses in, you weren't going to get any Toroids. It was very important that you brought in Necroses because Necroses stacked on one another. They added that in that update with Fortuna so that people could actually get Toroids. But you couldn't really do it with Hydroids, and you couldn't really do it with Koras, and we'll go over why. So let me go ahead and we'll start with Atlas, and we'll start with Atlas, and people always quote Orgaze as the thing to increase your loot drop chance. He has an augment, and that augment we'll go over, and I'll show you what I mean. So I have a 205% ability strength right there, and we're gonna go ahead and throw on his augment called Orgaze, and as you can see, he has a 25% drop chance to drop loot. Now, if we run and we just plug just a couple of numbers, I got still Orgaze right here. So we got a Rumbler heal by 100%, and you can increase that drop chance up to 51%. Still 3%. 51% is really, really high. But there's a couple of problems with using Atlas as a farming frame. The very first and foremost being that it's only 51%, it's 3% less than Nekros. So Nekros is just 3% better. But on top of that, Atlas has an additional items that drop on tables when he kills enemies. When he kills enemies, they drop a thing called rubble, and rubble is a resource that drops from the enemies that Atlas kills, and only drops for Atlas. It doesn't drop for anybody, and those are then added directly to all the enemies' drop tables. And rubble's really good for making Atlas invincible and stuff like that, but that doesn't do you good for loot. Rubble's only good for in-game. You can't build anything with it afterwards. It literally does nothing for you. So if you're trying to get something that you can use afterwards, say you're trying to get like Polymer, you can't be using Orgaze. And the other big flaw with this ability, which will be the biggest problem with a lot of the other Warframes, is this 51% does not stack. That means if you have 4 Atlases in the squad and they all petrify the same guy, you don't get 51% times 2 for every enemy that you look at. No, you only get 51% for every single guy that's basically covered in stone, and it's only a 50% additional drop. So that means if you, like that, for an example, if you have Atlas and he stuns and he freezes half the guys, and we got 20 guys out there, so he petrifies 10, and another guy, he petrifies 10, and 5 of his guys happen to be already been Orgazed, and then they go ahead and destroy all those guys. There are 5 guys that were missed. But with Nekros, if those same Atlases were to kill all those guys, Nekros would get a drop chance from every single one of them on top of the 51% that Atlas gives. So now let's go ahead and go through and explain why we might not want to do like a Hydroid. So let's go to Hydroid. And we'll find out this real quick that we're going to run into a very similar problem. Not nearly as bad as Atlas is because he doesn't have any additional things on his drop table, but you're going to come across a very similar problem. So we got Proliferating Swarm here. So Tentacle Swarms, enemies held by tentacles have 100% chance to drop additional loot. And we have so we got Proliferating Swarm there, and the number of tentacles you can spawn is 20. And each tentacle can only hold 1 guy at a time. As you can even see in the video, they're only holding 1 guy at a time. If you got a tentacle that was holding 2 guys at a time, it'd be a different story. But only 1 tentacle, 1 guy. And if it's only 1 tentacle, 1 guy, which it always is, then you only get an increased drop chance for those guys. Guaranteed, they're guaranteed to give you 2. And if you were to stack, you could stack this particular guy with Nekros, and Nekros would then turn that 100% into 150%. But the other problem with this ability is that it has a duration. You have to wait a full 19 seconds before you can recast that ability. It's not recastable like midway through it. You have to cast it, and it literally will stop you from actually casting the ability before you can actually cast it again. So even if you were to cast it once on the enemies, and you were trying to spam this, and you get 20 new guys in, and the Nekros comes in, and he just wipes out all the guys, all 20 of the new guys, and you still got your 10 that are dangling there, then you got an issue there. You just lost out on loot that you potentially could have had. So again, you have to be very particular with this one because they're held there. Okay. So, and then we're going to find the same problem. Another people's favorite is Korra. Now, Korra can hold more enemies and kind of resolves that problem, but at the same time, still has the same issue that Hydroid has. She has a cap. So let's go and look at her cap, and let's see how many enemies that she can hold. So let's see. We have Proliferating Strangledome. It has a 65%. So not even does it... So it does hold more enemies, but it's been reduced. So we've actually come out, we've actually been able to count, and we know that the Strangledome only has 25 vertices on it. And therefore, it can only hold 25 guys at a time. So if you can only hold 25 guys at a time, you only get a 65% drop. In some cases in farming, this almost makes her a little inferior to Hydroid, just because Hydroid can hold more, and he has that higher drop chance. And on top of that, you still got to wait the 31 seconds before you can recast, before you can, well, actually, I think you can recast multiple Strangledomes, it looks like. So, but you still have that limitation on her where she can only hold so many. Actually, you know what, we can go test that. Actually, I think it's 1. I think it actually might even deactivate. It's kind of like Frost where the bubble goes up and deactivates. But just that limitation alone where you can only hold so many enemies keeps you from having that superiority where you can get just every single guy. Now the best one, and this is the most legitimate argument I've ever heard, and not a whole lot of people think of this, but it's actually Ivara. Ivara has a really amazing passive. She can get every single guy. So she's gotten rid of the cap. She's gotten rid of the cap so she can get every single one of them. There's only one problem with her passive. She can only do it one guy at a time within 20 meters. So senses nearby enemies within 20 meters and can only get one of them at a time. So whichever one is closest, that's the one she tags. It takes a few seconds before it finally gives us that additional drop chance loot. Now, the reason why I say this can be sometimes superior is, take for an example, we had Empyrean that came back out in last December. Not just not the last December that we just had, but December of like 2019. So we got Empyrean of December 2019, and we got a scent of enemies. They were called the Symbolists for Veil Proxima on Empyrean. And what you had to do is you went in with 4 Ivaras rather than Nekroses. And the reason why you went with 4 Ivaras instead was because, A, the maps were really, really big. Like, you're talking about Railjack and a whole nother platform. So you had to take 4 Ivaras, you had to go in, infiltrate the sentient ship, then you had to go find these Symbolists, and all 4 of you had to stand by there, and each one of you would then steal from that Symbolist before you'd kill it, and you'd get 5 drops. Highest drop count, except you had to do it one guy at a time. For Symbolists, it wasn't a big deal, but in a normal mission, when you're trying to farm out a whole bunch of guys and you can only get one guy at a time, Nekros is going to beat this out every single time. So normal resource missions like Polymer Bundles, Ferrite, Oricon Cells, that kind of jazz, Nekros is the champ. Beats everybody hands down. Stacks with other Nekroses. You can basically take toroids. You can get 1,000 in an hour. You can got a good squad of Nekroses. You can go in and you can get like 600 or 900, between 600 and 900 mutagen samples in a single survival on Deimos. You can do so much with Nekros. When it comes to a single target, the only fair argument is that Ivara here will beat him out for a single target. Granted, these Warframes do have their own limitations. Doesn't really matter. It's kind of sort of universal with the drop chances amongst all the Warframes. You can have, for like an example, the Demolists, they're completely immune to it. And that goes for all 4 of the Warframes. There are particular enemies, including boss fights, where you can't get additional resources. If you're trying to get a particular item that drops from a particular mission drop rewards are not affected by any of these Warframes. So, for an example, Rhino parts, Warframe parts, resources that are specific to boss fights and mission reward completions, like Oricon matrices inside of Deimos, a toroid that would drop from, like the Lazarite toroid that drops from the Exploiter Orb inside of Fortuna, or even mods that drop from major bosses. None of those get impacted by these drop chances. Even mods, they got their own loot chance. Well, yeah, mods even, I believe, they're not impacted by this because these are strictly resource drop chance increases. They're not mod drop in chance increases. If you need a mod drop chance increase, you actually have to go to Steel Path, or if DE is nice enough, they'll give us all a booster on a special event or weekend. But essentially, other than that, if you're going for resources, Nekros is where it's at. You're going for weapons that drop from a particular enemy table, Nekros is where it's at. You're trying to get, but you got to be trying to get mobs of them. If you're trying to go for a specific target, it's going to be Ivara. Therefore, Ivara is the queen of farming, Nekros is the king. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.